Hi, everyone. This is Gary Berman, host of the Cyber Hero Adventure Show, coming to you with a unique opportunity to listen and learn from retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, who's a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. And this is going to be the first of several interviews that we're going to be talking about, focusing on national security. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, Gary, thank you very much for having me. It's good to be with you again.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about Ukraine today, and the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. So today is the day where they're meeting once again meeting in Riyadh, the United States and Ukraine, to discuss a way forward on a cessation of hostilities and some kind of peace at the end of this 3-year war. So let's be clear. The United States has been running a maximum pressure campaign against Ukraine to try to get them to the table to talk in a serious way to get to it. And one can question whether that was the right thing to do first, but it is what the president did. And so as a result, it's highly likely, part of this maximum pressure campaign, the United States will get some kind of critical minerals deal where we can, in a co-investment with the Ukrainians, extract minerals and probably get some that kind of access, which will be some kind of payback for all the assistance we get them. The president tends to say like $300 or $500 billion. The actual number is somewhere between 140 and 170 billion, depending how you count it. Some of which was money that was, a lot of that was money that was invested in the U.S. defense industrial base to buy weapons for Ukraine or buy weapons for the U.S. Army after the U.S. Army gave weapons to Ukraine. Some of it paid for U.S. military operations in Europe to support Ukraine. That money's accounted for. It's not stolen. It's not used, but it was used to defeat the Russian attack over the last 3 years. It's been very successful. The president also maximized the pressure by cutting off deliveries of weapons, by cutting off intelligence sharing. Again, not what I would have done. It did get Ukraine aggressively to the table, but I think it's some risk to Ukraine's sovereignty and security. And there's no doubt that Ukrainians are dying because of this lack of intelligence warning and lack of weapon systems. And again, this is the nature of warfare. Russia is the protagonist. Russia started the war. Russia is the authoritarian regime. What I'm hoping now that the president has Ukraine where he wants them, is that he turns a maximum pressure campaign onto Russia. Pressurizes Russia through secondary oil sanctions, through there's very little left to sanction in Russia, but we can stop them from selling their oil to Chinese and Indian secondary and tertiary markets. If you do that, Russia's economy is basically now running on on these fossil fuels. It's more, it's close to 50% of economic output, or at least the productivity that allows them to buy things. And then the Russian government kind of works like this. 40% of government spending goes to the military to fight the war. 60% goes to old babushkas to buy old grandmothers and family members to buy their support. If you begin to lower the amount of money coming in, then Putin will have to choose between fighting a war, which he would say winning that war is required for national credibility, for institutional credibility, regime credibility, or buying off his voter base, which is critical to regime credibility. So you will give him a strategic dilemma, and it will cause him to come to the negotiating table. Pretty straightforward. I'm hoping President Trump begins that in the coming weeks. I don't think we're going to have a cessation of hostilities or peace treaty soon, because I don't think Russia feels pressure yet. And I don't think Ukraine's excited about the peace deal that they're being offered unless Russia makes concessions. Because the Russian argument right now is they want all the land they've captured, plus they want Ukraine to lay down their arms, and they want no military occupation force from European countries. So basically, Ukraine is there for the taking whenever Russia wants in the future.
Wow.
I would tell you that's not a negotiating position the Ukrainians can embrace. So, Gary, that's how I see it. The maximum pressure campaign has worked on Ukraine. No surprise, not what I'd have done, but he did it, and he's got him where he wants him. Now he needs to do it to Russia, because if you don't do it to Russia, you're never going to get a deal, because you can get Ukraine where you want them, but if the Russian deal is ridiculous, no one's going to accept it.
And how does NATO fit into this in your assessment?
So Europe and NATO and Europe fit into it this way. President Trump has properly identified that Europe needs to do more. He told them in Trump 45, get your spending up to 2%. They did, largely 24 out of 32 countries, and overall they're above 2%. He's now saying appropriately, get up to 3%. That's where we're at. We're at 3.02%. Sometimes the president implies we're at like 4 or 5%. We're at 3.02%. Now that's a lot of money. That's $850 billion last year. We need, I like where we're at. I think we should actually be closer to what we were during the Cold War, which is around 4%, because we have a lot of adversaries. But for now, we're between 4 and 5% during the Cold War. We should be raising it. I think President Trump will raise it like he did during Trump 45 from 3% to 3.5%. He raised it to 3.4% in Trump 45, and then Biden lowered it back down again to 3%. So I love what President Trump does there. But he needs to do that. And then he needs to turn to NATO and Europe and say, you need to be the same. You need to be at least 3%. You need to care about your defense as much as we care about your defense. So I think he's doing the right thing there. And then he needs to say, you're the occupying force. You're the security force, the security guarantors who, put 5,000 to 10,000 troops into Ukraine to secure the peace.
Do you think they will do that?
Yes, I think Europe's ready to do that. I think Russia won't accept it right now, which is why I'm back to President Trump needs to run a maximum pressure campaign against Russia.
Wow, indeed. And what about just the casualties of war that people? Is there any way to minimize the suffering, of the Ukrainian people or even the Russian people, for that matter?
So you're absolutely right. There's been a lot of deaths. There's been almost 50,000 battlefield deaths for the Ukrainians. I think 150 to 200,000 for the Russians. Many, many more wounded. I think the Russians are in the 500, 600, 700,000 category for wounded and killed. And there's been a lot of civilian casualties in Ukraine. A minor number of civilian casualties in Russia. I'd like that to end. But it's, in fairness to Ukraine, it's got to end on terms that don't leave them exposed to a future attack, right? They cannot agree to terms that 3 years from now they get attacked with no visible defense.
So, like what happened with Crimea.
That's right.
And now
we had an inappropriate response to the 2014 invasion of Crimea. And, President Obama should have been much more aggressive in the weapons he provided. President Trump provided more aggressive weapons, but then slowed it down when he had problems with the Hunter Biden, Burisma kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He kind of slowed down the arms. And then President Biden, when he came in, did not crank him up fast enough when we could see war coming. So 3 presidents, 3 administrations did not do enough. So Why should Ukraine expect we'll do enough if we don't agree to it in the peace treaty?
Yeah, I mean, and with the background too, I mean, I can't remember the year, but we assured if Ukraine would stop development of its nuclear program, then we would provide security. I don't remember when that
in
was.
1994, you're absolutely right. 1994, we agreed if you surrender your nuclear weapons, remember they held nuclear weapons after the breakup of the Soviet Union, they returned them to the Russians.
Right.
We would guarantee their sovereignty.
Any final thoughts on?
Very good job.
Yeah, how'd that work out? Any final thoughts on Ukraine? Because in the next episode, we're going to focus on China, Taiwan, North Korea, and all that stuff.
So look, Ukraine is, I agree with President Trump. Ukraine and Eastern Europe has to be primarily a European problem. But that does not mean we're not involved, because Russia is an authoritarian state that needs to be checked. We are the world superpower. We do have to expend some energy to help Europe, but we should be the organizational power, provide the logistics, sometimes provide some funding. But the European needs to provide the troops. They need to get more aggressive. They have to have a better defense industrial base. I mean, right now, we are the arsenal of democracy. When democracies need weapons, we're the only place they can really go. There's minor efforts in Europe and in Israel and a few in Japan, but they're nothing compared to us. So we need the rest of the world to tool up a little better on this. And we need the Europeans to stand up with Ukraine. But we can't pull out. I think President Trump is probably a little too aggressive in his step back from this. But maybe it's a negotiating tactic. We'll have to see. But looking forward to seeing the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Indeed. Well, on behalf of a grateful digital universe, thanks for who you are and what you do and why you do it, and most importantly, um, for being my friend, if you don't mind me saying. And to our audience, stay tuned for more in this national security series from the Cyber Hero Adventure Show. Hi, everyone. This is Gary Berman from the Cyber Hero Adventure Show, bringing you a very special opportunity to listen and learn from one of the most informed people on the military aspect of geopolitical events around the world, retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Gary, thank you for having me back.
So in the previous episode, we talked about Ukraine and Russia. And so now we're going to address China, Taiwan, and what's going on over there. What's your take?
Well, thanks for asking. As I've mentioned before, I go to Ukraine a couple weeks every quarter, and I do the same with Taiwan. In Ukraine, I'm training there, providing training to them pro bono. In Taiwan, it's more about working with them because they're not in an active war on how do you deter China. And so deterring China is a complex issue, right? So China believes Taiwan is part of a one China policy. The United States, while acknowledging that the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing are China for the purpose of the United Nations and other issues and is the sovereign country in this, does not believe that China should be able to integrate Taiwan via coercion. So we have something called the Taiwan Relations Act. So the United States has said, we'll support Taiwan with arms sales. And by the way, we're the only country in the world that sells arms to Taiwan. So they build their arms indigenously or buy them from us. That's a problem for them when we don't have weapons available to sell because our defense industrial base is slow. But we also said we will make plans so that if China tries to coercively reintegrate Taiwan, we could militarily intervene. So that's two different aspects that have to work together. So the United States has to be strong to provide a deterrent effect to say to China, if you try to integrate them coercively, we will intervene. And then the Taiwan has to be strong that says, if you begin to conduct operations against us, whether they're cyber or a cross-strait invasion or missile attacks or a blockade, that we can hold you at bay till the United States comes up to support us. And then the weird thing is, their two and our two, that 2 + 2 needs to be coordinated so it equals 4 or 5. Right now, because we did 42 years of no exercises with them from 1980 to about 2023, so 43 years, we did no exercises with them. So we're actually, we're actually 2 + 2 = 3. So I'm over there trying to help to say, look, how do we, and we're trying to help in 3 areas. One, what are the right things that the Taiwan military needs to be buying in order to do their best against a Chinese lodgment? If the PLA came over and grabbed some territory and tried to take over Taiwan, through a cross-strait invasion, that's the first area I look at: how to make the Taiwan military better, giving them advice and things. The second one is, how do we exercise together? How do I work with how does the U.S. military system work with the Taiwans? I mean, we're creating something from scratch. And I worked closely with the Japanese as we kind of moved from being deconflicted, barely working together, to coordinated, to integrated over my naval career. So I try to bring some of those same skill sets, to Taiwan as we try to make 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 = 5. And the final thing we take a look at there is, how do we improve the societal resilience? What if China just tries a financial, or what we call a cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign, where they use financial tools. They cut off energy supplies, they take out communication systems with anchor cable drops and things, and then do cyber attacks. That could really bring Taiwan to its knees if they don't get support from the United States and Europe, and Japan, while it's happening. So we kind of do tabletop exercises to show how can we mitigate this? How can we make better preparations to prevent, respond to, or recover from these kind of attacks by China? So that's a lot of work going on in Taiwan. And so I've been there twice in the last month and a half, but normally it's about once a quarter to kind of work with them on that, because we consider them a beleaguered democracy, like Ukraine, like Iran, like the Republic of Korea, facing an authoritarian regime. And here at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, our goal is to help these beleaguered democracies when they're under the gun of an authoritarian state. Who, by the way, those four authoritarian states, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, are acting in a much more integrated way. We call them the axis of aggressors.
Yeah. Oh, axis of aggressors. Yeah. And plus, just one point, a follow up on Taiwan, not to mention the reliance on chip manufacturing and artificial intelligence and everything that's going on in that space.
That's a great point. Taiwan is not like Ukraine, or even, it's more like, it is we have a deep economic integration issue with them. They produce the high-end chips. They produce 70% of the world's logic chips. By the way, Korea produces the memory chips. Israel produces a lot of the software to drive all this. So, all three of these countries are very integral to our economy, but the Taiwan one's probably the most, through a company called Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, TSMC. One of the weird ironies, Gary, that your audience may not have captured, was that the TSMC chief executive officer was in Washington at the White House speaking with the president to announce $100 billion direct investment in the United States over the next 4 years, which is a big, huge investment from an economy their size. And someone might ask, why was it the chairman of the company, not the president of the country? We don't let the president of the country visit the president. We don't let the vice president visit. We don't let the minister of defense visit. So that TSMC, business leader was the physical manifestation of the Taiwan people and the Taiwan leadership in our White House announcing this deal. That's a big deal. And that's the kind of thing that should make us, I hope makes us, much more likely to collaborate and cooperate with them. So they are a close economic partner. They are a true ally, and they're a kindred spirit. They're a true democracy practicing capitalism. They're proof that China could have done it right, but the Chinese Communist Party chose the authoritarian communist route and did it wrong.
Well, so as we're wrapping up here, that's, very optimistic, and I appreciate that. And any other sort of seeds of hope that you can share with the audience?
So I think, the goal here, I have a son on a ship in Japan. I don't want war, right? I want a peaceful resolution. I want to be able to deter China from going to war. So our goal here is to deter China. Every morning when President Xi wakes up, or Chairman Xi wakes up and he looks in the mirror, he says, not today. Not today, because the United States and Taiwan and Japan are too much for my forces. The day he doesn't believe that is the day he starts that cyber-enabled economic warfare campaign to see if he can get Taiwan peacefully, and if he doesn't, escalate it to war. It's our job that when he looks in that mirror, he says, not today. And the way you do that is you deter somebody, you have the right forces, the right posture, your allies have the right forces, the right posture, and you integrate together so that 2 + 2 = 5.
How does our audience get more information on the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. We're on X and others, but, www.fdd.org, and you can look up, you can go into our China section, into the cyber section, into our Russia section, and you can read mine and the other scholars here's writing on it. We are pretty prolific. We publish, as a group, we publish 1 or 2 op-eds a day. We put out significant policy papers. But the most important thing is we're not just a think tank, we're a do tank. We get more legislation done. We have a action arm that takes our ideas. We write legislation, they go push it through. I can spend a percentage of my time pushing through legislation. We go to the executive branch. I just met with the Department of Defense on this. I've met with the NSC within the last week, and the Department of Energy and the Department of Homeland Security. So across any administration, we're deeply integrated. We're seen as honest brokers, and tend to provide pretty honest answers for these issues.
And if I'm not mistaken, to build on that point, your CEO, I was at a meeting once with you and your colleagues, and I think he said, we don't just think, we do shit.
Yes.
Which I think is a really good way to describe that.
We're a do tank, not a think tank. I think
indeed. Well, on behalf of a grateful digital universe, Mark, thanks so much for who you are and what you do, and and why you do it. And to our audience, stay tuned for more in this ongoing series, because it seems to me like there's a lot more to listen and learn about from retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. And we're off.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's great. That's perfect. I like
mission
these.
accomplished.
Good. Yeah, we can do a couple more. All right.
Well, we have to do the Middle East.
Hold on one
obviously.
second. Hold on one second.
It's running a little late, Monty.
So what time should I be there?
Let's see. Right now, just pull up the agenda.